Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions, where we have a mission to wake the world up to what's possible for healing, one brave word at a time. And here today to help me with that mission are some of the amazing co-author, poet badasses of a new book that we have coming out called 100 Poems and Possibilities for Healing. You guys, poetry has been a passion of mine since I was a teenager. And after writing a lot of it and publishing some books of it and being on the open mic circuit for a few years and speaking them out loud, I can tell you for sure that when, the day I woke up and thought, oh my gosh, why haven't we done a collaboration before now of poetry? I couldn't believe that I hadn't had the idea before now, but get ready, because this new book is soul-filled and will shift your energy. It's a powerful book, and you get to meet some of the poets today in this beautiful book. So Guy Kilchrist is a Navy veteran, retired engineer, educator, and Catholic deacon, a father of 3 and grandfather of 4. Guy, I'm so happy that you're a part of this project. Thanks for being here today.
Well, thank you, Laura, and it's a pleasure to be here.
So we have Heidi McAlpine, a holistic occupational therapist, podcaster, and owner of Align OT. They provide creative and meaningful activities such as nature, poetry, and animals that guide and transition children, adolescents, and adults with mental health issues, trauma, and sensory differences. Heidi, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. It's always great working with you, Laura, and being creative with other creative minds. So thank you for offering this.
Linda Eileen Miller is back for another book project. She's a multifaceted 76-year-old woman embracing the beauty and the chaos of life from the first breath to the last. Linda, I'm so happy that you're a part of this.
Thank you, Laura. It is, it's exciting because, like you, poetry has been a part of my life and part of my healing journey for a long time. And I love that I'm getting the privilege of being a part of this incredible book.
And last but not least, Richard Bredesen is a healer and technology expert, and together with his wife, Rosemary, provides spiritual services through their Church of a New Alliance, a nonprofit organization. Richard, thank you so much for being a part of this project.
It's been a great project, good fun, putting these, selecting the poems I wanted to put in your lovely book. And so I look forward to its publication.
All right, you guys, so let's get into this a little bit today. Guy, I'm going to start with you, and I just want you to tell everyone a little bit about the story behind the poetry for you.
Well, thank you, Laura. As you mentioned when you introduced me, I was a Catholic deacon, and just to be a bit more specific, a retired Catholic deacon. And just a little bit of that backstory, which was the impetus for the poems that I put in. I was born and raised Catholic and spent much of my life in the Catholic tradition, somewhat associated with the institution. As of I guess about 5 or 6 years ago, that's fundamentally changed for me. So I'm no longer complicit or identifiable with the Catholic institution. Now, having said that, there's still a lot of the Catholic teaching and certain aspects of the faith that I still give value to, and for its sort of inherent, intrinsic spiritual truths and theological truths. So I hang on to that. But in my somewhat exile from the Catholic institution, I wanted to take this idea of the sacrament of reconciliation, which I've studied to some degree at length, but to move it into more of a non-Catholic vernacular in terms of its understanding. So the 4 poems that I submitted were basically taking those 4 elements or aspects of that sacrament of reconciliation and bringing it out in poetic form, but in also for the wider masses, if you will, because I do think it has intrinsic spiritual and psychological aspects of well-being. So that's sort of the underlying aspects of the poems that I submitted. So it's kind of my way of not throwing out the baby with the bathwater kind of approach, but it's my way of trying to relearn and understanding certain aspects of reconciliation, self-reconciliation, self-healing, not only within oneself, but towards other people in the world. So that's sort of this underpinning of the 4 poems that I had constructed for the book. So
Guy, you know what happened to me in school with poetry once upon a time is I sort of learned rules, and that turned me way off of it. And I am excited for this book for the reason that when you all came in as poets, you came in so many different ways. Poetry can be so many different things. And I wonder if your story in terms of like how you learned it was similar to mine in terms of like the rules, and what's that journey been like for you to today?
Well, I somewhat see myself as not so much a rule breaker, but I operate within the fringes of the boundaries is where I operate. And so, rules have their value, and also but knowing them and operating on the boundary, that around that fence line, sometimes inside the boundary, sometimes outside the boundary. But that's kind of how I play the rules within the poetic structure, which has been the gift of poetry for me personally. Is my background on the technical side in my professional career was a lot of technical writing, and technical writing and poetry are almost the opposite ends of the spectrum. But that's been the gift of poetry for me. I don't have to use 1,000 words. I can use poetry, and it's kind of saying a lot with the least words. And it's also certainly a way of moving from the head space to the heart space. And that's where I love being at this stage in my life. So it's a great experience for me.
I love that, Guy. Thank you. And thank you again for being here. All right, Heidi, I'm going to move to you now. Tell us that story behind your poetry.
Okay, so I had a different thought originally, but when Guy was speaking, and this is where the connection comes with community, because that's part of my poetry as well, is, I was brought up, I went to parochial school for 9 years, and that's part of my poetry as well, but I didn't think of mentioning that today. But that is, I have to give gratitude and feel that respect for what was given to me by my parents, and also by my spiritual background in Catholicism, because it helped me understand what could live within me. I just needed to expand that thinking, my heart and my thoughts past what I learned. And that was through my life's journey, through all of my challenges, the barriers that I needed to overcome, as well as working with clients as an occupational therapist, dealing with illness, grieving, disability, trauma, sensory differences, challenges that people were experiencing, and sharing my personal experience into my professional experience to give other people hope and grace during challenging times. So that's just a bit of my background.
Is this the first time that you've published poetry, Heidi?
Yes. Well, no, it actually isn't. Just it's in a different format where I'm collaborating with others. I've always did it individually. I did have 2 different poems published, and usually it came out of trauma or challenging times, and it was my best work. So I didn't think about doing it this way. So I'm appreciative for you offering this to me as well.
Did school, like for me, mess you up in terms of like what we were allowed to do with poetry?
Yeah, I was a follower. I definitely followed the rules and stayed in the lines. And that's how parochial school was then, is you just follow the line, you don't go outside the lines, or there are consequences. But that being said, I remembered when Guy was talking about an English teacher that helped me love writing. She was a creative writer, and she had us do silly things like you're a piece of bubble gum on the bottom of someone's shoe. What do you tell? And I thought, that's great. I could write.
Hmm.
And I loved writing that. I loved being free to be and say whatever I wanted to when I wrote. So that was, part of my upbringing. And I'd like to mention her name, Mrs. Gagnon. She's no longer with us, but she did give me a piece of that spirit and love for writing and passion and sharing of that.
Oh my gosh, I love the positive stories of the teachers, like so much better than the negative stories. I love hearing that. Heidi, thank you again for being here today. Linda, let's hear from you. Tell us a little bit about the why behind your poems.
Well, the why behind my poems is just part of, I guess, part of my journey of where I am right now. I'm 76. I have shut down my office. My home is for sale, and I'm getting ready to move to a completely brand new area. And it's really offered me the opportunity to have a lot of reflection on life and what the last chapter will look like. And I had a very positive writing experience before you and I connected. Actually, the sister of the woman whose office I'm sitting in front of right now, she had a program called Soul Writing. And there were no rules. And she hates rhyming. And so what I learned very quickly was that I had been doing it right all along. And the fact that I just put my guts on the paper from the time I was 15, it helped me heal. Because if I kept it inside of me, it just ached. And if I could get it out and express the emotion of what was happening in my world, then it was everything found a way to escape rather than just dragging me down.
Well, I mean, most of you understand that the foundation that this whole publishing company sits on is writing, and publishing is a healing process. Did you feel, well, let me ask it this way, Linda, what was that feeling of when you published your first thing? Like, how did that go down in terms of your healing journey? I know, big question.
Huge.
Yeah.
It was around the time of my 60th birthday, and I had invited 6 of my closest friends, and we were doing a whole weekend. We all stayed together. We did the girly manicure, pedicure, massage thing. We all went to lunch together in a limo. And I didn't tell them where. I just said, show up and bring this, this, and this. And I had created what ended up being my first book, but it was a version just for them. It was, Who Is That Woman? And it was poetry that was, just, I handed each one of them a copy in the limo on the way to the restaurant. They each opened it to the page that was relative to them. Unbeknownst, they just opened the book, and there it was, the story about them. And they said, oh, you have to publish this. You have to publish this. And I was like, oh, hell no. I was like, I'm not putting this out in the world. And 2 years later, I had a beautifully watercolor illustrated book, Who Is That Woman? With those poems and many more. And so that was how it all started. That was,
I love it. And a book that I own and is on my shelf, you guys. And I don't actually know if I've heard that story before, which I love about today. Linda, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Laura. Thank you.
Richard, tell us a little bit about the why behind your poetry.
Thanks, Laura. The title of my chapter, which is chapter 20, is A Healing Journey Through Community. And what I've heard from the other 3 authors so far is that they've found community within which to within which to heal, whether it's six friends or the Catholic Church or whatnot. I think we all can find a way to heal through community. And so that's the basis and impetus for my chapter and the poems I selected to be part of that chapter. I got my inspiration primarily from Robert Bly. I spent a fair amount of time with him, and through Robert Bly, I also met Martine Prechtel, who would claim he is not a poet. However, every word he speaks is pure poetry, and every book he has written, all of which are prose, are all pure poetry. And so those two gentlemen created community for me that I was a part of. And the work that I did with them and through them was part of that, as I say, the healing journey, which was so alive for me a number of years ago. So that's the story in the book and in my chapter, and 4 poems that are relatively related to healing within community.
Community is such a juicy, amazing, and powerful topic. I really think that it was the difference between success and failure for me as a person, as a business, as a lot of things. And I think you honor it by talking about it this way and by writing poetry about it. And this isn't your first rodeo, Richard. You've published poetry before, right?
I've published in another collaborative book on the subject of that was circular leadership, and that's yet another community that was very important to me. A community of transformation, as a matter of fact, headquartered here in Annapolis, Maryland. And in fact, Laura, you spoke at our group one time and read some of your poetry at our meeting. So yeah, I published a poem within that book, and I also have a blog that I publish a lot of my poetry in, and that blog is menandthegoddess.com, honoring the divine feminine as she enters and takes over, I hope.
I love it. Thank you for that, Richard. And thank you for being here. Thank you. A big thank you to all 4 of you for not just for saying yes to this project, but for really taking on the challenge of how I envisioned these chapters, because you guys, this is no ordinary poetry book. This is a story, the why story behind the author about the poetry, and then they're offering these beautiful poems. And then after that, they've included a prompt for the reader to do a little thinking, to do a little writing of their own. And we can't wait for you all to see what this is and really be in it with us, because that was the idea. We're going to really inspire you with the words, but we want you to dabble too, right? And then of course you're going to meet all of our poets and read their bio and see what their background is, and we want you to get to know them. This, speaking of community, is much more than a book. It is a really generous community of people who want to help you on your journey. Heidi, what is the most important thing you want people to know about poetry?
I want them to know that it doesn't have to be so complicated. That's what kept me at a standstill, is thinking it had to be a certain way, but it's really from the heart, like so many of us had mentioned, and based on our own experiences. And that being in the moment, helping you to be in the moment. When you write, you're in the moment of your emotion and your thoughts, and you're really connecting that. So for me, it's just moments of grace as you're writing to get past that stuckness, or to get past that barrier, or whatever that might be.
Oh, I love that start to this question. It doesn't have to be complicated, y'all. Like, I will say ditto 100 times over to that. Linda, what do you want to add? What's the thing you want people to know, the most important thing you want them to know about poetry?
let it be easy. And I think that something that I learned or relearned from you is when you're in that stuck place, to not force it, to just take a breath, and the words will come. You know, you don't have to make them be a certain structure, and which is, similar to what Heidi said, but it's like, when we get to that stuck place and then we're trying to fit something around square peg in a round hole and it doesn't work and we lose the flow, we've lost the purpose. Let it be easy and let it come from your heart, because poetry heals. It heals, it heals, it heals over and over.
Richard, what would your version of the answer to this be? What's that thing you want people to know about poetry?
I think I would just add to the same feel that both Heidi and Linda shared, and that is keep it approachable. And so one of my friends recently said that he would rather sort his sock drawer than read poetry. And I'm thinking, well, why is that? And of course, I think we all know the reason. Some poetry can get fairly complex and fairly esoteric. That's not what I would want to write or convey to anybody that wants to read my poetry. It's approachable, and with that, through that approaching aspect, you find and feel the music.
Oh, the sort your sock drawer. And that's killing me. Yeah. And oh, do I want people to know that reading this particular book of poetry is going to change their minds about the sock drawer. That is what I want y'all to know about that. Guy, how about you? What's the thing you want people to know about poetry?
Well, I would certainly echo what my three co-authors have mentioned, but just to offer maybe something a little of a different angle. One is there's two different unique aspects to poetry. One is reading poetry, and then the other is writing poetry. And to speak on the reading poetry first, one is you don't have to understand every line or aspect of someone else's poetry. You don't have to try to understand it. And now so allow it to be the puzzle that it is. The aspect on writing poetry, once again, it's not more complicated than writing narrative or prose. It's actually much simpler, and especially if you adhere to the rule that there are no rules, and it's just about condensing and filtering from your heart, and let the words be what they are when they land on the paper.
I love the way everybody answered that, and it is one of the reasons why bringing together this beautiful community of poets and with all of your unique voices was important to me, because you all answered the question in the way the unique way only you could answer it, that somebody needs to hear it. Someone needs to hear how you answered that question in exactly that way. And it's the same with the stories and the poems themselves. And I so echo that there are no rules here. So if you were taught that you had to analyze or decipher, and that was, like my schooling was kind of like that, it turned me in the other direction from poetry. So it was when I was much older, as an adult, when I had practiced connecting to something much bigger than me, and I got to the point where that quiet, that stillness opened up a channel where messages and words began to move through. And at first, I would have never used the word channel with you guys. I couldn't do that. I didn't even know barely what it was until it happened, and I got curious. And then I just wanted more stillness. I wanted more time to connect, because in combination of that strategy and that higher power and source, all kinds of interesting words were moving through me, and I started to call them poems and poetry pretty fast, because they felt otherworldly to me. They felt bigger than me. And I know many of you feel the same about when poems move through you. And it's what I love so much. It's also why I titled this book 100 Poems and Possibilities for Healing. It could have been called Possibilities for Connection. It could have been called, a lot of things. You can call it whatever you need to call it. So let's hear some poems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Today, y'all have your poems ready. I'm going to have Linda go first with hers. And if most all of your poems have titles. By the way, you guys, some poems don't have titles. Some do have titles. Some rhyme, some don't. Some have single lines, some have blocks of text. Some look one way, some look another way. There are no rules about this, right? So, Miss Linda, if your poem has a title, please tell us what the title is, and then go for it. We want to hear.
Well, thank you, Laura. Prompted by the story, Who Was That Woman, Daddy, is the title. It's a play on the original book. So, who was that woman, Daddy? I wish I had known. No, I wish they had known. No, I wish my grandchildren and I had known each other. It seems I was the only one interested in being a priority, or even a tiny dangling participle in their lives. Guess the good birth parents slept through that part about honor your father and mother. Honor? Ha! I've settled for simply being an inkling inclusion. I'm done settling. Never in 8 years did we share a holiday on the holiday. Not even Groundhog Day or Juneteenth. For the love of God. And no, it's not my angry, foul mouth. I don't curse in front of my grandsons. Of course, with twice a year, 2-day visitations, I certainly have cause to. I'm leaving soon for parts unknown. It may be the scariest thing I've ever done. This is my last chapter. Making it matter counts. Making it count matters. Far more when you can see the finish line. Yep, it's exciting and bone-shaking scary. In 76 years, I've done some pretty exciting, pretty wow, wonderful, pretty amazingly awesome, pretty downright supercalifragilisticexpialidocious scary stuff. I wonder if one day my grandsons will ask, who was that woman, Daddy?
Oh my goodness. In the poetry world, we snap and clap, you guys. So I'm going to ask my fellow authors to snap or make some waves. We do that too. Linda, beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next up, we're going to hear from Richard.
All right. Well, thank you. The poem I selected is titled A Speculation on Perfection. And it's one of the 4 poems from the book. Someone once asked me, what if the world is perfect just the way it is? Pause, breathe, what if? Cosmologists say we are in a perfect state of balance for consciousness to rise and recognize self, light. Pause, breathe, what if? 1 trillion neutrinos hit every second. 1 trillion stars pulse in Andromeda. 3 trillion trees support the earth. Pause, breathe, what if? 100 trillion synapses in the human brain awaken connections across the universe. Flash to awareness. Pause, breathe, what if? Light and dark in balance, perfection. Love and consciousness, awake and aware. 100 billion humans passing this way. Pause, breathe, what if? Imagine perfection. I know you can. This is our universe filled with light and love. We made this through our connections. Pause, breathe, what if?
Oh my goodness, I'm going to give you the waves and the snaps. Thank you so
you.
much. Isn't it a treat to hear these, you guys? It's such a treat. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Okay, Guy, you are up next.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hearing the poems is just it's icing on the cake, really.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Of the 4 poems that I contributed to my chapter, the main chapter heading is Honor Thyself, Heal Thyself. And of those 4 poems, they were titled, the first one, Trench Warfare. The second was Hearing the Unspoken. The third, The Harmed and the Harmer. And the fourth was Absolution. And what I'd like to do is read the fourth one, which is titled Absolution. Accepting nothing less than where wisdom flows deep, where shame finds its grace, and where eyes can see no guilt, a victimhood cannot spawn. Chambers of remorse collapsed under their own weight, the sacred release of soul's burden to carry, which it never intended. Be as life giver and never a destroyer in the beloved's spirit. A sacred journey in love, we all travel to our end.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Yes, we'll do the twinkle fingers and a couple of snaps. Ooh, I sometimes, you know how you guys, you're not totally sure when the poem is going to end, right? So like the last line is delivered and then you're like, okay, that was the end. Like, but most all the time just wants the person to keep going. Like, just keep going. Oh my gosh, so nice. Thank you, Guy.
That's true.
All right, Heidi, you are up. Are you ready?
All right, those just have expanded, and hopefully my reading is a result of the expansion that I've created amongst all of you. So I'm chapter 27, and I wrote 2 poems, and I started it by a quote from C.S. Lewis, and it states, "The present is the only time in which any duty can be done or any grace received." So the one poem that I chose to read is Awakening the Senses Through Grace and Community. And it's called A Sense of Community. To those voices and sounds that are like ribbons dancing around my heart, they facilitate and motivate without words, just simple gestures. A quote a bouquet of flowers, a meal that somehow grounds me, allowing me to feel without expecting anything from me. Yes, I am here listening and aware of your kindness. I hear myself saying this, but my mouth isn't moving. I feel like an empty space, an endless sea of words. It is stored for retrieval later, just in case. If you have experienced a disconnect after tragedy, then you know what I mean. You are not alone. In your comfortable state of numbness, the community has made attempts to connect with meaning and heart-centered care to reconnect. When silently retreated, you had gently awoken my senses to mend the tiniest pieces of my broken and splintered white picket fence, momentarily dropping my defenses. Somehow my pain has changed my perception. It has been cloudy without clarity. These simple gestures, a smile, a hug, a lending ear, a warm, healthy meal, brings light and feeling. I'm listening. I hear you. I feel you in my space. You are softening my pain. Ah, life. I miss the strength and brightness of your vibrancy. You, my community, is filled with love and grace, have brought back the light and colors among the shading and shadows of doubt and uncertainty.
Thank you, Heidi. Snaps and claps. Oh, okay. That's a taste of the beautiful poetry in this book. And you know what? I think I'm going to read one today. You guys ready?
We're ready.
All right. I got to put my glasses on. Let's see. This is, I believe it's the second one in my chapter. And it's called You Were Born to Cry. You were born to cry. It's how we knew you were alive. It's not ugly, wimpy, weak, or in any way unmanly or unspeakable. If you can cry, you can laugh. Both are nice. Crying is the gift you were given to feel, express, release, relax, acknowledge. It's how we know your heart is working, how we know our soul is present, how we know something matters. It's a moment of deep healing. Happiness, sadness, unconditional love, deep grief. Tears are the sacred salted water we make for every best moment. Please cry. It's how we know you're alive. It's how we know we're safe to be alive with you. And if you've grown ashamed to cry, afraid, embarrassed, or stuck in conditioned meanings from the past, pause for a moment, right there in that pain, for a long, patient breath, and reclaim your power in the next. You were born to cry and laugh and sing and feel every single thing in the grandest capacity, all the sorrow, all the joy. Your heart sends a flood of tears so it can grow. So let it break again. Don't be afraid to crack wide open. Honor your cry. Give yourself the gift of getting better at it, along with the not letting that be anyone else's business but yours. Unless, of course, you're lucky enough to find a shoulder who doesn't mind reminding you that you were born to cry. That soul was meant to show you just how strong you can be, and that sharing a cry means two hearts or more have grown in size, and the world heals in half the time. So let yourself cry, warrior. It's okay to cry. It's how we know you're alive. All right, that was mine for today. Thank you all. I have one more question for all of you today. And Richard, I'm going to start with you. So we're talking to our listeners here today, and if you had to pick one simple step to practice on a day when everything feels impossible and overwhelm is kicking in, tell us what that would be. What do you want them to know? Oh, let me unmute you first, Richard.
I didn't know I got muted.
There you go.
The first thing that comes to mind, Laura, is to take a breath. And when I say take a breath, I'm talking about a very, very important, special, I call it a Qigong breath because I teach and practice Qigong. It is a deep into the belly first breath, and then you let that, you follow the breath as it rises up through the middle of the chest and then even up into your throat and up into your head. Big inhale, and then you simply relax the breath back out again. You can sigh it out if you choose, but it's a breath just to recenter and bring yourself back into the present moment.
Oh, I love it. Perfect, simple, profound healing in a breath. Yeah, you guys, I love that we started that question with that technique, Richard. It's a good one. Okay, Guy, how about you on this question? So if you had to pick one simple step on that day when everything just feels impossible, what would it be?
Well, I'm going to show you how much of a rule breaker I am.
Uh-oh.
Instead of one, I'm going to give you two quick ones. One is first is to write each day. And even if that's just one single word, even if it's one single word, write each day. But the second one, and it's a practice that I do in the morning. It's a form of centering prayer. And it's a form of meditation, but not quite. Centering prayer, and I'm not going to go into the details, but the best way to understand it, we pretty much all have a pretty good idea of meditation in a particular form where you're focusing on a mantra or a single thought, and you stay within that focus for a period of time. Centering prayer is like that with one major exception, and it's instead of focusing on a thought or a word or a mantra, it's to not focus on that one word. And it's basically what it does for me personally. It helps me to have a form of mindfulness to realize that my thoughts are not the final end, and that there's something greater than my thoughts. And it's a practice that kind of brings a deeper awareness into that particular truth. So centering prayer, there's a lot of stuff on the internet and YouTube that talks about it, but that would be my one thought.
Yeah, perfect. Profound practices, you guys. Thank you. We can have centering prayer with the breath. We can combine these two. I love it. Heidi, what's that one technique you want to share?
Okay, so this is challenging. I work with people with all challenges and learning styles, and I have utilized the two that were mentioned previously. So I'm going to connect something with not only just breathing and centering through a thought or a prayer. I'm going to talk about humming and the simplicity of humming, and what humming does as you're breathing. It creates a vibration which helps to relax your nervous system. And there's more and more data on this and the power of sound, vibration, whether it's through humming or an instrument in sound. So I would combine the breathing with the humming to help create that centeredness.
I love it. Oh my goodness, these things are so powerful, you guys, these tools, these practices. And you all, so far, the three of these, they're instant shifters. Every single one of these so far. Linda, you're going to close us out today. What's your addition?
So after you pause and you breathe and you pray and you find your center, I want you to jiggle it out. It's an old technique from myofascial. It's like that silly little bobble dog in the back of the car. You start letting your knees go first. You shimmy, you shake head to toe. There are no rules. It doesn't have to have a rhyme or a rhythm. Just shake it, shake it, shake it, and trust that there is something way bigger than all of us driving this bus.
I love that. Thank you, Linda. Oh my goodness.
You're welcome.
Linda and Guy, Richard, Heidi, thank you so much for what you do in the world and for being here today to share it with everyone. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
All right. If you were listening today, I know that you heard something that either gave you the goosebumps or made you curious. And just know that this is so much more than a book of poems that we're about to publish, right? So come on down to the show notes, because I have all of our authors hooked up with their websites and their links there. Please go explore what they're up to. They're very generously here for you to support, to answer a question, to take this to the next step, whatever you all need. And that's what I love the most about this Brave Healer community. Y'all are badass like that. And please remember that you can join us for a book launch party for 100 Poems and Possibilities for Healing. We're going to be partying on January 12th in the new year. And that'll be a little bit after the actual book launch. So if you happen to be listening to this interview, anytime on that date or after, that just means you can hop over to Amazon and get your copy of this beautiful, beautiful book. And lastly, everyone, remember, your words change the world when you're brave enough to share them. So it is time to be brave. See you next time, everyone.